The emergency klaxon wailed through the corridors of the Valiant like a wounded animal screaming its final death cry. Commander Sarah gripped the armrest of her command chair, her knuckles white with tension, as she watched the tactical display transform from peaceful blue to angry crimson in a matter of seconds. 3 massive battlecruisers had just emerged from the jump gate, their signatures burning through every sensor array humanity had deployed across this sector of space. "Status report," Sarah commanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She'd trained for this moment her entire career, but no amount of simulation could truly prepare you for the real thing, for the moment when theoretical threats became cold, hard reality. 3 capital-class vessels confirmed, ma'am, Lieutenant reported from the tactical station, his fingers flying across holographic controls as data streamed in from every defensive platform in the sector. They're arranging into attack formation. Preliminary analysis suggests Dominion military configuration. The lead vessel's IFF signature matches High Admiral's flagship, the Sovereign Raptor. Sarah's breath caught slightly. The name carried weight throughout human military circles. The High Admiral was a legend among a reptilian warrior who had personally orchestrated the conquest of 7 star systems over the past decade. Each conquest had been brutal, efficient, and ultimately profitable for the Dominion. He was everything humanity had feared when they first achieved spacefaring capability. An experienced, ruthless commander with access to superior firepower and absolutely no mercy. And he just violated the 4th perimeter marker. "Sound general quarters," Sarah said, her mind already racing through contingencies. "All hands to battle stations. Get me a direct communication line to their flagship. If wants to talk before we start killing each other, I'm willing to listen." The bridge of the Valiant transformed into controlled chaos. Officers who had been casually monitoring systems moments before now moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, each one understanding that lives depended on every action, every decision, every second that passed. The ship's AI announced in its mechanical voice that shields were coming online, weapons systems were powering up, and all non-essential personnel should proceed to secure areas immediately. Sarah watched the fleet advance on the display, their trajectory taking them deeper into human space with every passing moment. She'd seen the intelligence reports, read the diplomatic cables, reviewed the threat assessments. They had been making noise about expanding their territory for months. The Dominion's home sector was becoming overpopulated, resource-depleted, and politically unstable. This invasion wasn't some crazy gamble. It was a calculated political move designed to provide the Dominion with new worlds, new resources, and a way to consolidate power back home. But had made one critical miscalculation. He'd assumed humanity was unprepared. The communication channel opened, and a face appeared on Sarah's. High Admiral was everything the reports had described, scaled in deep emerald green, with predatory eyes that gleamed with intelligence and barely concealed violence. His armor was adorned with medals and insignia representing conquered worlds, each one a symbol of his brutal competence. "Commander," said, his translated voice carrying a note of what might have been amusement, "I trust you've reconsidered the Dominion's generous offer. Surrender your territory peacefully, and your species will be incorporated into our civilization with minimal casualties. Resist, and—" he smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Well, you know what happens to species that resist the Dominion." Sarah took a breath, meeting his gaze through the... She thought of Earth, of the colonies scattered across human space, of the millions of people who were counting on her decision in this moment. "You're about to cross the 4th perimeter marker, High Admiral," she said quietly. "That's our red line. Cross it and this becomes war." His expression didn't change, but his scales rippled with what might have been contempt. "Red lines are drawn by powers strong enough to enforce them, Commander, and you," he gestured dismissively, "you're just children playing with weapons you don't understand." Sarah's fingers moved toward the authorization panel. "Then you've made your choice," she whispered. His confidence was about to cost him everything. The space around the formation erupted into a hell of thermonuclear fire and kinetic devastation. What it assumed was empty void suddenly revealed itself to be a carefully orchestrated graveyard of automated death. Thousands of cloaked mines, positioned in 3-dimensional lattices that would make even the most experienced tactical officer weep, detonated in perfectly synchronized cascades. The first explosion caught the starboard escort frigate, a sleek Predator-class vessel that had personally escorted conquest fleets to 3 different star systems. Its shield generators, designed to withstand concentrated laser bombardment from peer combatants, were utterly helpless against the sheer overwhelming kinetic force of fusion warheads detonating at point-blank range. The ship's superstructure crumpled like wet paper, its internal systems cascading into catastrophic failure. One moment, it was a lethal instrument of galactic conquest. The next moment, it was expanding plasma and twisted hull fragments spiraling through the darkness. "Evasive maneuvers," roared, his voice taking on an edge of something that might have been fear. His tactical officers were screaming coordinates and damage reports in rapid-fire succession, each new explosion painting fresh red icons across their displays. They had conquered 7 systems, but they'd never encountered anything like this. A minefield so dense, so thoroughly integrated into the surrounding space, that it was virtually impossible to navigate without sustaining catastrophic damage. Sarah watched from the Valiant's bridge with grim satisfaction. 3 years of work, billions in resources, and countless sleepless nights had gone into creating this defensive architecture. Every mine positioned with mathematical precision. Every detonation sequence timed to maximum effectiveness. She'd walked through the planning chambers with human engineers and strategists. Yes, the ancient allies who'd provided crucial technical consultation, and they'd created something that would haunt military academies for generations. "Second frigate struck mines on the port side," reported, his voice clinical despite the carnage unfolding on the displays before him. "Shield integrity failing, they're losing structural cohesion, internal explosions cascading through their reactor core." The second frigate detonated in a massive nuclear bloom that temporarily blinded every optical sensor in the sector. When the light faded, there was nothing left but expanding debris and radiation signatures marking where a military vessel had ceased to exist. Sovereign Raptor was taking hits that should have been impossible. The flagship was equipped with some of the most advanced shield technology in the known galaxy, but shields were designed to dissipate energy gradually, distributing damage across their surface. They weren't designed to face the kind of overwhelming kinetic assault that human weapons platforms could deliver. The sheer mass of metal traveling at relativistic speeds, combined with the explosive force of fusion warheads, was simply too much for any defensive system to handle. One of the Raptor's officers screamed that the aft section was venting atmosphere. Another reported that their weapons array was suffering cascade failures across 3 stations. The flagship's AI was announcing system failures so rapidly that no human or operator could possibly respond to them all. Then the real nightmare began. 17 orbital defense platforms suddenly powered down their stealth fields in perfect synchronization. Each one had been hovering in the darkness, cloaked so completely that even sensors, the most advanced in this sector of space, had missed them entirely. They emerged from invisibility like vengeful gods, their weapons arrays already tracking and targeting the Dominion vessels. The kinetic accelerators opened fire first. These weren't typical weapons. They were designed to fire projectiles the size of small cargo containers at velocities that made conventional technology look quaint. A single projectile, traveling at speeds approaching significant fractions of the speed of light, struck the Sovereign Raptor's starboard section. The impact was so catastrophic that Sarah's crew actually felt the vibration through the hull of the Valiant, kilometers away. Internal explosions bloomed across the flagship's superstructure like malignant flowers, each one more violent than the last. His face, visible on Sarah's, showed a mixture of disbelief and fury. His scales had darkened to almost black, a sign of extreme stress in physiology. His voice, when he spoke, was stripped of all confidence. "All ships full reverse thrust. Get us clear of this system immediately." The remnants of the fleet turned desperately, accelerating toward the jump gate that would carry them back to the safety of Dominion space. But human space wasn't finished punishing them yet. The vessels screamed through space at maximum acceleration, their engines burning with the intensity of dying suns. Had commanded his fleet to retreat in a desperate gamble, get clear of the minefield, reach the jump gate, and escape back to Dominion territory where they could regroup and reassess. It was a calculated decision, the choice of a seasoned military commander who recognized when a battle had become unwinnable. But Sarah had anticipated exactly this response. "Activate secondary defense grid," she commanded, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had planned for every conceivable scenario. "Full weapons release. I want those ships to understand that retreat is not salvation, it's merely prolonging the inevitable." The space around the fleeing vessels suddenly transformed into an inferno of directed energy and kinetic fury. 17 orbital defense platforms, each one equipped with enough firepower to level a small city, powered down their stealth fields simultaneously in perfect synchronization. They had been hovering in the darkness of space for weeks, their positions secured through quantum-entangled coordinates that sensors couldn't possibly detect. Now, revealed in all their terrible glory, they opened fire with the devastating precision of an orchestra conductor, bringing in every instrument at precisely the right moment. The first volley was kinetic, massive projectiles the size of cargo containers traveling at velocities that reduced conventional physics to mere suggestions. These weren't conventional weapon systems. They were the product of 3 years of human innovation, refined through countless simulations and theoretical models, now unleashed against an enemy that had never encountered anything remotely like them. The Sovereign Raptor, already damaged from the minefield engagement, took 3 kinetic rounds directly to its aft section. The first impact shattered what remained of the ship's structural integrity. The second and third rounds simply finished the job, turning the once-proud flagship into a tumbling wreck-venting atmosphere and internal components into the cold darkness. Watching from the command center as his flagship tore itself apart around him, experienced something he had never felt before in his entire military career: the paralyzing certainty of impending death. "Evasive maneuvers," he screamed, but his words were drowned out by proximity alarms and damage reports. "All ships, scatter formation, get away from the defense platforms." But there was nowhere to scatter to. The human defense grid had been positioned with mathematical precision, creating overlapping fields of fire that left virtually no safe vector for retreat. Every maneuver the pilots attempted brought them into the targeting solution of a different platform. Every evasive action they took moved them closer to annihilation. One of the remaining frigates, the last escort vessel that had somehow survived the minefield, attempted a desperate run toward the jump gate. Its pilot, understanding that staying in this system meant death, pushed the ship's engines to their absolute maximum, accepting the risk of catastrophic failure in exchange for a chance at escape. But the human weapons platforms were patient, precise, and absolutely merciless. 2 kinetic projectiles fired in sequence caught the frigate amidships. The vessel simply ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. Its hull collapsed inward, its reactor went supercritical, and within seconds there was nothing left but expanding debris and radiation signatures. Sarah watched the destruction with clinical detachment, each explosion a confirmation that her strategy was working exactly as planned. They had come expecting easy conquest, and instead they were learning one of the fundamental lessons of galactic warfare. Never underestimate a species that has spent years preparing for your arrival. The Sovereign Raptor, despite its massive damage, continued accelerating toward the jump gate. Its crew was moving through the ship with desperate urgency, attempting damage control that they all understood was ultimately futile. The flagship was dying, bleeding atmosphere and systems with every passing second. But there was one final lesson the human defense grid had prepared. As the damaged flagship approached the jump gate coordinates, Sarah transmitted final instructions to the automated systems. The jump gate disruptor stations activated, creating a field of gravitational distortion that made space itself impassable. Jump drives couldn't function in areas of severe gravitational stress. It was a fundamental law of physics that no technology could overcome. The Sovereign Raptor shuddered as it attempted to activate its jump drive and found only failure. The gateway that should have led to safety became a barrier, and its only choice was to continue running or stand and fight. He had already lost. "All remaining vessels hold position," his voice crackled across the communications channels, stripped of all confidence now, reduced to the hollow words of a commander facing total annihilation. "Prepare for negotiations." Sarah leaned back in her command chair, allowing herself the smallest of smiles. The Dominion had just learned why no one entered human space uninvited. The news propagated across the galactic communications networks with the speed of light itself, carried on quantum-entangled transmissions that reached every major civilization in human-known space within hours. The message was simple but absolutely earth-shattering. The Dominion, one of the most feared military powers in this sector of the galaxy, had been utterly destroyed by humanity, a species that had been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. In the grand halls of the collective, ancient scholars who had studied galactic conflicts for thousands of years sat in stunned silence. Their tactical computers, running sophisticated probability models based on centuries of warfare data, had assigned them a 97% chance of victory. Yet somehow, impossibly, humanity had turned what should have been a routine conquest into a complete and utter catastrophe. "How is this possible?" whispered Ambassador OK, a gaseous entity whose consciousness had persisted through 4 different galactic eras. The possessed superior numbers, superior firepower, and the element of surprise. By every conventional measure of military superiority, they should have annihilated the human defenses. The answer, when it finally emerged through detailed analysis of the battle data, was far more terrifying than any conventional military advantage. Humanity hadn't won through brute force. They'd won through preparation, ingenuity, and a level of strategic planning that suggested a species fundamentally different from anything the galaxy had encountered before. In the crystalline citadels of the Empire, the ancient rulers of this galactic sector began taking an intense interest in Earth's transmissions. They were old, so old that they had watched 3 different galactic civilizations rise and fall, and they possessed sensors and analytical capabilities that made other species' technology look primitive by comparison. What they detected in humanity's defensive architecture was something that excited and unsettled them in equal measure. Evidence of fundamental innovation in weapons systems, defensive theory, and strategic doctrine. The High Council wishes to open formal diplomatic channels with the United Earth Coalition, the ancient being Eth announced to his peers, his crystalline form refracting light in hypnotic patterns. "This species is not merely competent, they are dangerous in ways we have not fully calculated." The Syndicate, always eager to position themselves on the winning side of any conflict, immediately began arranging trade delegations and diplomatic missions to human space. They understood power better than almost any species in the galaxy, and they recognized it when they saw it. A young species that could utterly devastate an established military power was a species worth cultivating relationships with, not opposing. Meanwhile, in the capital worlds of the Dominion, a very different story was unfolding. High Admiral returned to face interrogation rather than welcome. His reputation, built across decades of military conquest and calculated aggression, lay in ruins. The Dominion's Leadership Council demanded explanations. How had 3 capital-class vessels, representing a significant portion of the Dominion's military strength, been destroyed by what they'd been assured was an inferior species? The answer was worse than simple military defeat. It was humiliation. Found himself watching recorded footage of the battle from multiple angles, each one confirming the same horrifying truth. Humanity had anticipated the invasion, prepared countermeasures of staggering sophistication, and executed a defense that made it look like they'd been planning this specific scenario for decades. "Your tactical incompetence has cost us dearly," declared High Council member, his scales darkening with rage. 3 of our most advanced warships, thousands of trained military personnel. And for what? To announce to the galaxy that the Dominion can be defeated by a species barely 2 centuries old. But worse than the formal recriminations were the subtle shifts in galactic politics that began immediately after the battle. Species that had previously maintained cordial if distant relations with the Dominion suddenly became cool and calculating. Trade partners began renegotiating terms in humanity's favor. Military alliances that had been rock solid for decades began showing cracks as smaller powers started hedging their bets, wondering if perhaps the rising human power might be a better ally than the apparently declining. Sitting alone in his quarters, understood the terrible reality of his situation. He hadn't just lost a battle, he'd lost his position in the galactic hierarchy. The Dominion, which had been on an upward trajectory of conquest and expansion, had suddenly become a cautionary tale. Other species whispered about folly, the catastrophic decision to invade human space and face annihilation. The High Admiral made a decision that would echo across human space for years to come. If he couldn't defeat humanity through direct military confrontation, he would bleed them slowly. Raids on outlying colonies, disruption of trade routes, 1,000 small cuts instead of one decisive blow. He didn't realize that Sarah had already anticipated this response as well. The galaxy had shifted on its axis, and humanity had become a force that even the most ancient and powerful civilizations had to take seriously. 6 months after the devastating defeat of Sinvasion Force, Commander Sarah stood in a war room that would have been unimaginable just a year earlier. Around the tactical display table stood military commanders from 3 alien species, each one representing civilizations that had barely acknowledged humanity's existence before the battle. General Eth of the Empire was a being of pure crystalline structure, his form constantly refracting light in hypnotic patterns that somehow conveyed emotion and intent to those trained to read such things. His presence alone in a human command center represented an unprecedented diplomatic breakthrough. The ancient beyond measure did not typically associate with younger species, except in matters of hierarchy and subordination. Captain of the Syndicate was a creature of sharp angles and compound eyes that missed nothing, a being whose species had built an empire on reading power dynamics and positioning themselves advantageously. His mandibles clicked with what might have been amusement as he studied the tactical display. Admiral S of the Collective existed partially outside normal three-dimensional space, her consciousness distributed across quantum-entangled states that made conventional communication a constant challenge. Despite this, her tactical insights were proving invaluable. They had perfected strategies for coordinated multi-species warfare centuries ago. "Is staging another raid," Eth announced, his crystalline form refracting in patterns that conveyed urgency and tactical assessment. "Our sensors have detected 17 capital-class vessels and 43 escort frigates assembling at the Dominion's forward staging area. They're targeting your station colony, a relatively isolated outpost with minimal defensive capability." Sarah studied the intelligence data flowing across her personal display terminal, her mind already mapping out responses and contingencies. The station had been deliberately positioned as bait, a tempting target that appeared vulnerable but was actually the centerpiece of an elaborate trap that would have made a chess weep with envy. "He's predictable," Sarah said quietly. "That's his weakness. Has conquered 7 systems, and he's followed essentially the same tactical doctrine in each conquest. Strike hard, strike fast, overwhelm local defenses before reinforcements can arrive." "And this time?" asked, his compound eyes reflecting the tactical display's light. "This time, he walks into a coordinated ambush involving forces from 4 different species operating with perfect synchronization," Sarah replied. "He expects to face human defenders. Instead, he'll discover that the galaxy has decided his reign of conquest has ended." The plan was elegant in its complexity. The station would appear to be defended only by human forces, a garrison of perhaps 5,000 personnel with limited orbital assets. In reality, destroyers were positioned beyond sensor range, their cloaking technology so advanced that sensors couldn't detect them even if they were specifically looking. Interceptor squadrons were staged at nearby asteroid fields, ready to cut off any escape vector. Tactical vessels were arrayed in quantum sewer position, existing in multiple possible locations simultaneously until the moment they needed to collapse into physical reality. It was warfare on a scale and sophistication level that humanity had never previously attempted. A joint operation with 3 alien species, coordinated through encrypted communications networks that crossed light years, executed with the precision of a single unified command structure. "When do we initiate the trap?" S asked, her distributed consciousness considering multiple tactical scenarios simultaneously. "When commits his main force," Sarah said. "The moment he passes the point of no return, the moment he's too deep into the engagement to retreat safely, that's when we collapse the trap. I want him to understand with absolute certainty that he walked into something he couldn't escape from." Over the next 72 hours, the various Allied forces moved into position with precision that would have been impossible just months earlier. Human technicians worked alongside engineers to calibrate weapons systems for perfect coordination. Pilots trained in formation flying with human and pilots, learning to compensate for species-specific differences in reaction time and tactical thinking. Sarah walked through the command center, observing the controlled chaos of final preparations. Officers from different species worked side by side, communicating through translation systems that converted both language and conceptual frameworks into mutually comprehensible terms. This is unprecedented, said, coming to stand beside her. 4 species fighting together against a common enemy, if we succeed. When we succeed, Sarah corrected him quietly. The balance of power in this entire sector shifts, the stop being a regional threat. Humanity moves from being a curiosity to being a genuine galactic power. She watched the final preparations with the calm certainty of someone who had prepared for every conceivable contingency. Was about to learn that his greatest mistake had been assuming humans would face him alone. The engagement lasted exactly 47 minutes from initial contact to final surrender. What should have been a brutal, grinding battle of attrition became instead a demonstration of overwhelming coordinated power that would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. His fleet emerged from jump space, expecting to find lightly defended human colonists and orbital stations. What they found instead was a carefully orchestrated nightmare of converging firepower from 4 different species, operating with inhuman precision. The destroyers first, their weapon systems already locked and firing. The ancient crystalline beings possessed technology that made conventional human weapons look primitive. Energy weapons that could slice through starship armor like plasma through butter, defensive systems that adapted to incoming attacks in real-time, tactical computers that processed information at speeds that made biological minds seem frozen in time. As capital ships took the first volley and immediately began losing structural integrity. The Dominion had built their military reputation on superior numbers and overwhelming firepower, but they had never encountered technology this advanced, deployed by a species this experienced, coordinated with this level of precision. "All starboard shields failing," screamed one of his tactical officers, his voice climbing toward panic as the displays before him filled with red indicators representing destroyed weapon systems and failing defensive platforms. Then the interceptors arrived, cutting off every possible escape vector with the precision of experienced hunters closing a trap. Had led his pilots personally, weaving through the chaos of the primary engagement with a grace that suggested centuries of combat experience compressed into a single species' collective memory. "Incoming fire from port sector," another officer screamed. They're attacking from coordinates that shouldn't have any presence. How are they?" Those were the tactical vessels, collapsing from quantum superposition into physical reality at the precise moment when their weapons' fire would be most devastating. S's distributed consciousness was calculating firing solutions for 6 different enemy vessels simultaneously, a feat of tactical processing that no single-minded species could match. Sarah watched from the Valiant's bridge as her human warships took up position to complete the encirclement. Her own role in this battle was less about delivering firepower and more about ensuring that the coordinated defense didn't collapse into chaos, that 4 different species, each with their own tactical doctrines and communication protocols, remained unified in purpose. "All units maintain formation," she transmitted across the encrypted multi-species command channel. "First Squadron, maintain suppressive fire on enemy capital ships. Interceptors, continue denying retreat vectors. Tactical Command, prepare to collapse the northern gate. Human forces, prepare secondary bombardment." His fleet attempted to break through the encirclement, but there was nowhere to go. Every vector led into concentrated firepower. Every maneuver brought his ships deeper into the coordinated assault. The High Admiral, who had personally orchestrated the conquest of 7 star systems through superior tactics and ruthless execution, found himself facing something he'd never encountered before. An enemy he couldn't outthink, because the enemy wasn't a single tactical mind, but rather a unified consciousness composed of 4 different species working with perfect synchronization. One by one, capital ships went dark, their systems cascading into failure as the coordinated assault continued. The Sovereign Raptor, already damaged from the previous engagement, took an energy weapon directly through its reactor core and simply ceased to exist, converted into expanding plasma and radiation signatures. After 47 minutes, his fleet had been reduced to a fraction of its original strength. The High Admiral, facing total annihilation, made the only decision available to him. "All remaining vessels stand down," he transmitted, his voice stripped of all confidence and authority. "Cease all offensive operations, prepare for negotiations." Sarah received his surrender with a grim sense of satisfaction. 3 months of coordinated planning, of bridging the communication and tactical gaps between 4 different species, had paid off with absolute and decisive victory. But more than the military victory, something far more important had occurred. The galaxy was watching 4 different species operate as a unified force, and the implications were staggering. The old order, where ancient powers dominated through superior technology and experience, had shifted fundamentally. A coalition of species, united by common interest rather than ancient hierarchy, had proven they could defeat even experienced military powers through coordination and innovation. Within weeks, the ramifications began spreading like wildfire across galactic civilization. Species that had previously maintained distant relationships with humanity began seeking deeper diplomatic ties. Trade agreements proliferated. Research partnerships formed. Educational exchanges between human institutions and the ancient academies of the began immediately. The Dominion signed a peace treaty that required massive reparations and formal acknowledgement of human territorial sovereignty. But more importantly, they were forced to face the new galactic reality. They were no longer the rising military power. They were the cautionary tale that younger species studied to understand what happened when you underestimated your enemies. Within 3 months, the economic calculations had shifted dramatically. The reparations payments were painful, but the trade agreements with human space and the allied species were generating profits that actually offset most of the costs. Found himself replaced as military commander, his reputation destroyed, watching from the sidelines as the Dominion entered into a new era of prosperity through commerce rather than conquest. The greatest irony was that attacking humanity had made them richer than they'd ever been under their previous strategy of constant military expansion. Fleet Admiral Sarah sat in a private communications chamber deep beneath the surface of Earth, surrounded by the most sophisticated broadcasting technology humanity had ever constructed. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering. Walls lined with quantum processors, transmission arrays capable of reaching every corner of known space, security systems designed to prevent any unauthorized interference with the signal she was about to send. She'd spent 3 days writing and rewriting this message, working with advisors from 6 different species, including the High Council itself. Every word had been carefully chosen, every phrase deliberated upon, every sentence crafted to convey maximum impact while remaining absolutely truthful. The message would be transmitted simultaneously across every major communications relay in the galaxy. It would be received by creatures of crystalline structure and gaseous consciousness, by species that had conquered 1,000 worlds, and by species that had only recently achieved spacefaring capability. It would be analyzed by military strategists and political philosophers, debated in academic institutions, quoted by warlords considering their options. Sarah activated the transmission systems, watching as the broadcast began its journey across light years of space. Her face appeared on screens across the galaxy, a human woman, relatively young by galactic standards, yet bearing the calm authority of someone who had repeatedly faced down extinction and refused to surrender. To every power considering war against humanity, she began, her voice steady and measured. I want to be absolutely clear about what will happen if you cross the red line into human space without invitation. She paused, allowing the weight of that statement to settle across the galaxy. Your ships will burn. They will burn in the darkness of space, torn apart by weapon systems you have never encountered before. Your soldiers will die, thousands of them, perhaps millions, facing defenders who have spent years, decades, preparing for your arrival. Your commanders will make decisions they believe are sound tactical doctrine, only to discover that those decisions have led them directly into carefully prepared kill zones. Sarah leaned forward slightly, her expression hardening. But military defeat is only the beginning. If you attack humanity, you will face not just human weapons. You will face the united strength of every species we have allied with. The ancient beyond measure, whose technology makes conventional warfare seem like children playing with sticks. The syndicate, whose pilots have perfected the art of coordinated aerial combat. The collective, whose tactical understanding spans thousands of years of galactic conflict. Her eyes seemed to bore directly through the camera, into the consciousness of every being receiving this transmission. We have demonstrated this capability. The Dominion learned this truth through direct experience. 3 of their most advanced battle cruisers were destroyed. Their High Admiral was forced to retreat in disgrace. Their military reputation, built across decades of conquest, was shattered in less than an hour. Sarah's expression softened slightly, becoming almost sympathetic. But this is not a message of aggression. This is a warning delivered with the hope that you will heed it and make the correct decision. Humanity does not seek conquest. We do not desire to dominate the galaxy or enforce our will upon other species through military superiority. We simply want to exist. We want to build. We want to trade and learn and grow. She paused, letting this distinction sink in. If you come to human space with peaceful intentions, you will find welcome. If you come seeking trade, we will negotiate in good faith. If you come seeking knowledge and cultural exchange, you will find partners eager to share what we have learned. We are willing to work with species from across the galaxy, to form alliances based on mutual benefit rather than dominance and subordination. Her voice hardened again, the underlying steel returning. But if you come seeking conquest, if you come believing that humanity is weak and vulnerable, if you come expecting easy victory, then you will learn otherwise. You will learn the hard way, through the loss of your vessels and the deaths of your soldiers, that attacking human space is the worst decision you could possibly make. Sarah straightened in her chair, her bearing becoming almost regal. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us to prosper. There are resources beyond measure, worlds waiting to be explored, knowledge waiting to be discovered. Competition does not require violence. Growth does not demand conquest. We can all rise together, or some of us can fall. The choice belongs to those considering their next move. Her final words were delivered with absolute cold precision. Respect our boundaries, honor our sovereignty, treat us as equals in galactic affairs. Do these things, and we will be the most valuable ally you could ask for, the most profitable trading partner, the most enthusiastic participant in the great work of galactic civilization. She leaned back slightly, her expression becoming almost pitying. But cross the line, attempt invasion, seek to conquer human space, and we will end you. Not through cruelty, not through unnecessary suffering, but through the application of overwhelming military force until you no longer represent a threat to anyone. The transmission ended, Sarah's face fading from screens across the galaxy to be replaced by the seal of the United Earth Coalition. A stylized representation of Earth circled by a ring of defensive installations. A symbol of humanity's refusal to surrender and their determination to protect what was theirs. The message propagated through the galaxy at the speed of light, and with it came a fundamental shift in how species calculated their interactions with humanity. Sarah had just declared humanity to be a genuine peer power in galactic affairs, and she'd backed that declaration with evidence written in the destruction of the invasion force. Species that had previously dismissed humanity as an interesting curiosity began treating them as a force to be reckoned with. Warlords reconsidered their expansion plans when they realized their targets now had access to defensive technology. Smaller powers began seeking human protection rather than fearing human domination. The galaxy had shifted on its axis, and humanity had become a weight that even the most ancient civilizations had to balance against in their strategic calculations. 5 years after Sarah's message had resonated across the galaxy, the observation deck of the Valiant showed a vision of space that would have seemed impossible just a decade earlier. Humanity's primary trade station, orbiting Earth itself, had grown into a sprawling megastructure that dwarfed anything that had existed in human space before. Merchant vessels from 50 different species docked simultaneously at massive berths, their hulls bearing the colors and insignia of civilizations from across known space. Though we're here, their sleek vessels integrated seamlessly into the trade hub's operations. What had begun as reparation agreements had transformed into genuine commercial partnerships. The Dominion's scientists had begun collaborating with human researchers on agricultural and medical technologies, relationships that were proving mutually beneficial beyond anyone's initial calculations. Sarah, now Fleet Admiral and Supreme Commander of Human Space Defense, stood watching the controlled chaos of commerce with quiet satisfaction. She'd spent 5 years transforming humanity from a species defending its territory into a civilization that was genuinely integrated into galactic affairs. "Ma'am, we have priority communication from the Colony Research Station," her aide announced, interrupting her contemplation. "They're requesting immediate attention." Put them through, Sarah said, turning toward the communication display. The face of Dr. James appeared on screen, his expression barely containing his excitement. The botanist had spent 3 years working on a hybrid agricultural project, a collaboration between human genetic engineers and quantum biologists. The results had been nothing short of miraculous. Admiral, the latest growth cycle has exceeded projections by 42%, reported, his voice trembling with barely contained jubilation. The hybrid crop is not only more productive than conventional strains, but it's also capable of growing in environments previously considered unsuitable for agriculture. We're talking about making food production possible on at least 200 worlds that were previously considered marginal at best. Sarah felt a surge of something deeper than military satisfaction. This was what victory truly meant, not just the ability to defeat enemies, but the capacity to build something lasting. Thousands of worlds would be able to feed growing populations. Hunger, that ancient scourge of civilization, would become obsolete across an enormous swath of the galaxy. "Excellent work, Doctor," she said warmly. "Allocate additional resources as needed. I want this technology distributed to every allied species immediately." As face faded from the display, Sarah's contemplative mood was interrupted by a priority alert from the High Council. The message's classification level was extraordinary, something that required her personal attention. She opened the secure channel and found herself face-to-face with Eth, the ancient general who had become her closest ally among the alien species. "Sarah," he said, using her given name in a way that suggested extraordinary gravity, "we must discuss a matter of galactic significance. Our sensors have detected something in the outer reaches, something that should not exist, something that was destroyed ago." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "The Void Collective," Eth said quietly. "An ancient evil, a civilization that consumed entire star systems that treated other species as food. We destroyed them 10,000 years ago, sealed them away in quantum-dimensional prisons we thought would last forever." He paused, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that conveyed deep concern. "The seals are failing, Sarah. They're returning." Sarah felt the weight of the moment settle upon her shoulders. For 5 years, humanity had been climbing toward acceptance and integration into galactic civilization. They'd proven themselves as warriors, as traders, as innovators. Now, it seemed, they would be tested in a completely different way. "How long until they reach populated space?" she asked, her mind already running through strategic calculations. "Perhaps a year, perhaps less," Eth replied. "The High Council has made a decision, Sarah. We are requesting humanity's assistance, not as subordinates, not as junior partners, but as full equals in a defense alliance that will include every civilization willing to stand against the darkness." Sarah stood silent for a long moment, understanding the implications. The galaxy faced an extinction-level threat, and humanity, a species barely 2 centuries old in terms of spacefaring capability, was being asked to stand alongside the most ancient powers in the known universe. "Tell the High Council that humanity accepts," she said finally. "We will stand with you, we will fight, and we will win." As she disconnected from the communication channel, Sarah looked out at the stars beyond the observation deck. Humanity's greatest challenges, it seemed, were only just beginning. They had proven themselves as defenders of their own territory. Now they would prove themselves as defenders of the galaxy itself. 5 years ago, she had delivered a warning: attack human space and face destruction. Now she would deliver something different, a promise that humanity would stand with the galaxy against whatever darkness threatened them all. The age of humanity's isolation was over. The age of their true integration into galactic civilization was just beginning. And somewhere in the darkness of the outer reaches, something ancient and terrible was awakening, preparing to discover that the galaxy had changed, that a young species called humanity had risen to prominence, and that they would not surrender, would not break, would not back down from any threat,